Hello everyone, and welcome to some human on human action featuring Hikaru Nakamura versus Magnus Carlsen. It's round 6 of the London Chess Classic, and it's a pretty big game for Hikaru Nakamura. So far in classical games, Nakamura had a pretty terrible score against Magnus Carlsen. Of all the games they played, Nakamura won only one game. I think it was the one in 2013 in Bilbao, and lost 12 games to Magnus Carlsen. So the score is 12 to 1 with 23 draws. That's not a very good result. Here Nakamura has the white pieces, and more importantly, tomorrow is Hikaru Nakamura's 30th birthday. So this win would definitely mean a lot to him. For when he wakes up on his birthday, that he defeated the world champion, and for the standings in the tournament. So let's see this game. Nakamura has the white pieces, and we have e4. So already seems like it's going to be an exciting game. e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and d4. Nakamura goes for the Scotch, and probably inspired by recent AlphaZero games and his games against Garry Kasparov. E captures on d4, knight captures on d4, and knight to f6. Knight captures on c6, b captures on c6, and now e5, the Schmidt-Mises variation. We have queen to e7, queen to e2, and knight to d5. And here I believe it was Kasparov who played this against Wesley So in the Ultimate Blitz Challenge. c4 was played, and then this bishop to a6. But in this game, Nakamura goes for the early h4, preparing a very early rook lift, also probably inspired by games of AlphaZero. Bishop to b7, c4 now, knight to b6, and rook to h3. Queen to e6 by Carlsen, f4, we have castles, and a4 now. And I remember there was a game between Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov. I think Karpov was playing I don't know if Karpov was white or black, but either Karpov played h4 and a4, or it was h5 and a5. And Kasparov said, "This is no way to play chess. You can't push h5 and a5, or h4 and a4 doesn't matter." Went into a deep think and then crushed him. But we'll see how Nakamura pulls it off. d5 by Carlsen. Now a5, giving Carlsen two options. Well, three, but I guess knight to a8 isn't something you want to play, since a6 will trap your bishop. But he can go knight to d7, or he can accept the challenge by playing knight captures on c4. And Carlsen accepts it. He plays knight captures on c4, b3 now. The knight has nowhere to go. Bishop to b4 with check. We have king to f2, and now knight captures on a5, and I don't think this was an easy decision for Carlsen. If you play something like bishop back to c5, then it really depends what Nakamura plays. If he plays king to e1, you can always repeat moves, but if he at some points decides to play king to g3, then you have this maneuver bishop to g1, now not allowing the king to escape through f2 or h2. So probably rook to h1, kicking the bishop back, but now bishop to d4 with an attack on the rook. And after something like rook to a4, now queen to g6 check, checking the king and attacking now the knight that is undefended on b1. You have to react to this, and the only move is queen to g4, blocking the check and also checking the black king. And after the exchange happens, now knight to e3 check. King to f2, if you capture then bishop captures, so king to f3, knight captures on f1, now a6, first kicking the bishop, bishop to a8, and now rook captures on d4. But now it seems like your knight is trapped, but actually Carlsen would have a way out. c5 with an attack on the rook, rook to d1, and now e4, creating a discovered check from this bishop on a8, and also creating an outpost on e3 for the knight. So after king f2, knight e3, the knight is able to save itself. Bishop captures, d captures with check, and king captures. It's a pretty equal endgame. Carlsen would have a nice bishop against the knight, but still, both rooks are on the board. Both pairs of rooks are on the board, pretty equal. So after king to f2, Carlsen decided to go for the feisty variation. Knight captures on a5. We have bishop to d2, and this is the problem. You can't capture the bishop. Capture, knight captures, protecting the b3 pawn. This knight has nowhere to go. So after bishop to d2, c5 was played, and now, of course, this was Nakamura's idea all along. Rook captures, knight on a5. Bishop captures, and bishop captures. So 2 pieces for a rook. Queen to f5 by Carlsen, he has to control the c2 square. If you allow queen to c2, then this c5 pawn is probably gonna fall, and moves like knight to c3 to b5 are coming, attacking a7, and c7, the bishop is also attacking c7. So Carlsen has to defend the c2 square. Knight to c3 now. Queen captures on f4 with check. King to g1. Nakamura doesn't mind giving up another pawn. We have rook h to e8, and this was also probably not a very easy decision, as you could go for something like d4, and after d4, knight b5 attacking c7, and after a6, knight captures, and now rook to d7. Queen to c4, rook captures, bishop captures, king captures, and queen captures on c5 with check. King b8, now queen d6 check. King to a8, and bishop captures on a6. Rook to c8 now, preparing ideas like rook to c1 check. The queen is covering h2, but then either bishop captures, and this will force a draw, or bishop to c4. It's a pretty equal game. The material is equal. It's hard to say. Probably a draw. So after king to g1, Carlsen plays rook h to e8 instead of d4. Knight to b5 now, and here we have a6. Rook to f3 first, kicking the queen away. Queen captures on e5. Queen captures, rook captures, and now bishop captures on c7, attacking both of Carlsen's rooks. Rook e to e8, now bishop captures, rook captures, and knight back to a3. And at the end of this variation, Carlsen is down a piece, but he does have 3 pawns for the piece. So can Hikaru do this? A piece against 3 pawns. We saw that Alpha Zero can pull off a piece against 4 pawns, but that was a bishop pair. So let's see how Hikaru does this against the world champion. Rook to d7. Carlsen defends the f7 pawn. Bishop to d3 now. And here he's attacking this h pawn, and it's not like in Fischer-Spassky that this is a poison pawn. You can't trap it with g6 because h5 will break open the position. King to d8 was played, and you can also play something like g6. This does preserve your pawn, but then rook to f6, allowing the rook to infiltrate the position. This might have even been better than what Carlsen played, because the rook will infiltrate the position anyway. So after bishop to d3, Carlsen played king to d8, starting to activate the king, and now bishop captures on h7. g6, temporarily trapping the bishop, and now h5. G captures on h5, and rook to f6. So the rook has, it still came to f6, infiltrated the position, and there was some talk of rook to f5 in the commentary, attacking d5, attacking h5, pressuring d5. Not allowing this pawn to be pushed, because then c5 would be hanging. But Nakamura decided to go for rook to f6, not allowing Carlsen's bishop to go anywhere. Bishop to c6 was pretty much the only way to develop the bishop, give it some use, but now it really doesn't have any moves. So king to e7, attacking the rook, and now rook to b7. Rook to c7 by Carlsen, knight to c2, a5, we have knight to e3, c4, bishop to c2, now bishop to c6, b captures on c4, b captures on c4, and rook to a6 now, going after the a5 pawn. a4, bishop captures a4, and now bishop to e4. So Carlsen now has 2 pawns for the piece, and they're not any connected pawns, they're just 3 pawn islands, so it shouldn't really be a problem. Europe a piece, 3 separated pawn islands shouldn't be a big deal. Rook to a5, king to e6, rook captures on h5 now, and c3. So now Carlsen has only one extra pawn for the piece, but it's a passed pawn on c3, preparing to be pushed on c2. We have bishop to b3 check, king to d6, bishop to c2 now, not allowing the pawn to be pushed. Bishop captures on c2, knight captures on c2, and now king to e6. And how do you win this? It's not very simple, especially when you're playing the world champion. King to f2. Now Hikaru improves the position of his king. f5. So the king can approach deeper into the position. The rook was blocking it. Rook to h3. We have king to e5. Rook to d3. King to f4 by Carlsen. Rook to d4 check. King goes to g5. Now king to f3. Rook to c8. Rook to a4. Rook to c7. Rook to a8. And king to f6. Rook to a6 check, king back to g5, knight to d4, and rook to c4, attacking the knight, knight to e6 check, king to f6, knight to f4, a discovered check from the rook, king to e5, and knight to d3 check, king to d5, and rook to a2 now, not allowing the pawn to be pushed, and king to d4, now attacking the knight. Knight to c1 was played. We have c2 by Carlsen, and this is a very critical moment in the game. Here Nakamura has to play rook to a3 and not allow Carlsen's king to approach deeper into the position, but instead of rook to a3, Nakamura played rook to a5. And it seems like it's a perfectly fine move, you know, you're winning the f5 pawn, and sooner or later you will sacrifice your knight for this c pawn and then simply push the g pawn up the board, as Yasser calls it, the g-pawn express. Rook to c3 check, king to f4 by Nakamura, rook to c8 now, and again, this was probably, I'm pretty sure this was the last chance Nakamura had to play rook to a3 to again cut the king out of approaching this c2 pawn, but instead Nakamura played rook captures on f5. And here Nakamura was already very low on time, but Carlsen had like over half an hour on the clock, and he got really excited because I think Carlsen also, I think he got the flu or something. He looked pretty sick, and Leonard Oates, the photographer, said that Carlsen looked really sick, but that he couldn't get a good photo of him being sick. So rook to e8, Carlsen finds it, and this is the only move that gives black a chance. The idea is rook to e1, attacking the knight, and when the knight moves to b3, then rook to b1, and then the knight won't really have anywhere to go, you will be threatening promotion. So rook to f7 by Hikaru, rook to e1 now as planned, rook to d7 check, king to d3, rook to c7 check, king to d2, and now knight to b3 check. And this is the position Hikaru probably saw when he captured that f pawn. He probably calculated king to d1 or maybe king to e2, because if you play king to d1, this simply doesn't work. What Hikaru missed was king to d3, which is what Carlsen played. Because if you play king to d1, then rook to d7 wins easily. But now, if you play king to d3, rook to d7 doesn't do anything. King to c3, you attack the knight, rook to b7, rook to b1 now, and you can't really do anything about this. You have to push the g4 pawn, rook captures on b3, and after rook to c7 check, king to d2, there's no way to win this. Rook captures c2, king captures, it doesn't really matter, and it's a draw. The pawn will go up the board. So after king to d3, here Hikaru knew that he blew it, that he will not have a nice birthday present tomorrow morning when he wakes up, and he played knight to c5, king to d4, knight to b3 with check, king to d3, knight to c5, repeating again. Here Hikaru had less than a minute on the clock. King to d4, again knight to b3 check, king to d3, and here it was a threefold repetition, but Carlsen didn't call the arbiter to, you know, to tell him it's a draw. And here Nakamura, I mean, it was a threefold repetition, but Nakamura still doesn't want to play knight to c5. He wants that victory for his birthday tomorrow, and he plays g4. So everybody was very, I'm not gonna say shocked, but very surprised that Hikaru is still trying to win this. So rook to f1 check, king g5, and now rook to b1 as planned. And here you don't really have anything else to do. Knight c5 check again, king e3, knight to b3. Now Nakamura is trying to get Carlsen to grab the knight, but if you grab it, then rook captures on c2, and then the g-pawn will win the game now. So after knight b3, Carlsen ignores the knight, simply king to d3, knight c5 check, king e3, and after knight to b3, in this position Carlsen called it the arbiter and said that he's about to make his third move that will create a threefold repetition. So in this position, Carlsen and Nakamura drew the game. So as of this day, the new result between the two of them is 12 wins Carlsen, 1 win Nakamura, and 24 draws. So too bad for Nakamura. Could have been a very nice birthday tomorrow, but you know, you're playing the world champion. It's never easy. So yeah, that's the game. I would like to thank Olve Risnes, Andrew Bergman, Benjamin Gleitzman, and Peter Mataga for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.